Welcome to Love the Way You Live with Charlie Lewis, where we connect you with people who share their secrets of living a purposeful and fulfilled life. We got you covered on all things media, entertainment, travel, food, and style. And today, that brings us to the one and only Miguel Antoinne, who is one of New York's top fashion men designers. So welcome to the show, Miguel.
Thank you for having me, Charlie.
How you doing?
I'm well.
Good. Well, for you guys don't know, Miguel is an African-American fashion designer and entrepreneur. He has a 5,000 square foot store here in Soho at 39 Wooster Street. He's been doing fashion since the age of 10, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
So basically, how did this all get started for you, basically?
It started very early on. I grew up around it my entire life. My mother was a dressmaker. So I worked in her atelier, which was in the middle of our living room, and so everyone in our neighborhood and adjacent neighborhoods, every, big event, my mother made the dresses, whether it's for a wedding or prom, a night on the town, my mother was the seamstress that you go to have your dress made. And so I was always around it. She made all of our clothing growing up. Part of it was out of necessity because we grew up poor. The other part of it was because, it's just what she did for a living. So all of our clothing were always unique. So I cut my own patterns. I always stayed in the secondhand shops, like taking things apart, piecing them back together again. So it started very early on, and it just sort of carried out as a theme throughout my life as being around fashion. I've just always been very much attracted to it.
Okay. Did you have that fascination? Was it just you? And how many siblings did you have?
I'm one of 9.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm number 5.
You're number 5. Okay. And your mom made all your clothing?
She made all the clothing.
Okay. Wow. Patterns and everything. I remember those patterns.
Singer.
We used to get, Singer and all that kind of stuff. We used to go down. Sure. Yeah. My mom made some bad suits too. She was a good seamstress too. Yeah. So that was your start in love from the beginning. What are some of the, when did you know that this could be a career? When did you realize that?
I think I realized it early on when people started saying you graduate high school, you get into a good college, you go to business school, and you get a job as somewhere in banking and finance, or either you be a doctor so you can live in a big house and drive a car, a nice car. And I was like, wait a minute, those aren't my aspirations. Are those things that I really like? And I did it. I graduated high school, went to college, and thought that I'd go into be a banker, move to New York City. And I was lucky enough to have a reality check and say, wait a minute, that's not the life you want. What is it you truly want out of life? What are you good at? And it was always fashion. I look around and I say, okay, well, I'm really into, clothing, and I'm really into, style and design. I have an entrepreneurial spirit. Fashion is what I should do. And so I started thinking about, well, if you want to do fashion, where are you going to go? And start researching where are the top fashion schools in the world. And in New York, or either I was going to have to go to London or Paris. And so I chose New York. It was close to home. I can get back to my family very quickly. I didn't have a lot of money, so there was no way I was going to be able to, jump ship and live comfortably in another country. So I chose New York, and I came here and I studied at FIT. And that was the journey.
All right. After FIT and after that experience, what was that experience like? Did it give you everything that you needed? Did you know after finishing FIT that, hey, I want to be a designer, I want to own my own store? What were you thinking? What was going on in your head at that time?
Yeah, I was pretty level-headed by the time I got into New York. I had gotten most of my partying out of the way. Being one of 9 people, I presume one of 9, you probably had an older spirit than most of your peers. Yeah, I had gotten most of my partying out of the way once I moved to New York, and so I was pretty focused when I got into FIT. I finished the program in 3/4 of the time that it takes to finish the program, because I was just very siloed in on what I wanted to do. So I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew that I wanted to work in fashion. I didn't know in what capacity, I didn't know if I was going to be a designer or if I was going to be a textile designer, a fashion designer or a textile designer, or whether or not I was going to, open a store. I just didn't know in what capacity, a retailer, but I just knew that this was going to be the industry. So I really focused in on the core principles of design and entrepreneurship while I was at FIT.
Okay. What was your first opportunity after FIT?
I worked for a junior dress manufacturer on 7th Avenue. It's my first job on 7th Avenue. You know, it was like a big day for me. It's like, wow, I'm here on 7th Avenue.
Right.
And we made, you know, dresses for the juniors market. And so, you know, big accounts, you know, not very high fashion, but very big accounts, very big business. And I had a lot of freedom. You know, I could go in and my ideas were valid, you know, from day one. I go in and I design a dress and we made it by the end of the day. And so that was just a really exciting experience starting out.
Okay. And then from there you did what?
And then from there, I wanted to go out on my own immediately. I mean, even before then I wanted to go out on my own, but I didn't feel like I had enough of the business acumen to go out on my own. I also didn't have any resources to go out on my own. And so I said, well, where can I learn, you know, beyond just the design aspect, to learn a little bit more about running a fashion business.
Right.
And ultimately, in essence, to be able to work for myself. And so I took a job working at Bloomingdale's where I was a buyer at Bloomingdale's, and I really got an opportunity to see how the transactions were made, the buying and selling of fashion, not only from the whole B2B wholesale to retailer, but also to the end user and the consumer and what the reaction is there. I got a really fast, you know, wide experience working for Bloomingdale's, and that really gave me the confidence to say, hey, you can do this on your own. You're a designer. Now you've got a little bit of an experience with how business is transacting. You really can, you know, take this on.
I can imagine being a buyer and seeing the brevity of everything. You know, men's, women. Did you specialize in one particular area? Was it men's or women's or just everything in general?
So I was what they called a bouncer because I was interested in so much. And so anytime there was an opportunity, even lateral, I'd take it just to get a different experience. So I worked in men's trousers. I worked in suits and sport coats. I designed a line of sweaters and knits. I even worked in fine china. You know, I worked all across the spectrum because there was just different levels of executive experience that you got in the different departments based upon, you know, where the availability was.
Right. And then after Bloomingdale's, what was your next opportunity?
Well, I knew it was time to leave Bloomingdale's when I started my company while I was working at Bloomingdale's. Literally at my desk at Bloomingdale's, I started the company. And I realized that, you know, once my phone started ringing more for what I was trying to do and then, you know, my actual job, I knew that it was time to go. And so after Bloomingdale's, I went out on my own.
Okay. Now, going out on your own, what did that look like for you? Did you have a store, you know, because this is in what year is this?
This was, I started the business in 2008. So prior to that, before, you know, organizing a corporate structure, it would have been late 2007. And it was scary. You know, I started with no money.
Right.
You know? I remember, you know, pitching my ideas to investors as sketches on paper. And you know, when you're pitching people with sketches, there's no tangible product for them to relate to. And that's a really difficult process. And so, you know, I had a little bit of money saved up and I said, hey, well, you know, I'm going to create a collection. You know, people, you know, can't touch and feel what's on, you know, this two-dimensional sketch. They need to feel something in reality. Right. And so I created a collection. It was small. It wasn't one of my best collections, but at least it had something just for them to touch and feel. You know, they got a sense of, you know, my taste level in the fabrications that I selected. And, you know, I started shopping around looking for investors. I started right here, you know, on 126th Street in my studio apartment, which was about the size of the area that we're sitting in now. Right. And, you know, I have a funny picture of that, too. It's like, you know, fabric all around me. I'm sitting there with my shirt off, and I'm at the computer, and I'm designing. But I started in a very small apartment right here. I think the apartment was probably 400 square feet.
Wow.
Maybe that.
Yeah.
You know, my mom came to visit me one time, and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" She's like, "Baby, you can scramble eggs from the couch."
I love that. Not scrambled eggs from the couch.
But you know, it ties back to my story. You know, her atelier was in our living room.
Yes.
You know, and we had to work around our life around her work. You know, and so it was the same sort of that same experience.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much the start of it all. Was just really, you know, in that small apartment, and you know, little by little building, you know, a business until I was able to secure financing.
Did you know that you wanted to do men's financing? I mean, men's clothing, or did you start doing women's clothing? How did you set your sights on becoming a men's designer?
Yeah, so I understood women's very much just by being around it so much and, you know, really working on the silhouettes with my mom. I always was fascinated with menswear because I just thought there was such a missed opportunity. I really felt as though at the time there weren't, you know, many designers pushing the agenda forward when it came to menswear. And we haven't seen that, you know, until recently if we really think about it. And so at the time that I was thinking about that, I was fascinated about, you know, these ideas and things that I weren't finding in my closet, things that I couldn't find in the store that I really wanted. And so, yeah, menswear was always that focus. Yeah.
Okay. And then when you started your store, financing and securing financing and capital, as an African American, and especially in the fashion world, we always know that getting access to capital is very difficult. How did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so, you know, I grew up very poor. And so, you know, they always tell you that, you know, the first place to go look for financing is family and friends. Well, family was poor, friends were poor too. You know, so there was not really that opportunity. So that was X. So then, you know, I just started asking everybody and started doing a lot of research. You know, I think I'd go and sit in Barnes and Noble. Wow, they're not even around.
I know, right? Yeah. That's amazing.
I'd go and sit, you know, sort of like the startup business, you know, how to raise capital sections of, you know, Barnes and Noble in the library and just like read. You know, small business administration. And, you know, I started, you know, and then, you know, I thought about, well, now it's time to write a business plan. I've accumulated all this knowledge, it's time to write a business plan. And so I wrote the business plan myself in that same apartment here in Harlem. And it took me a summer to write it. I was very focused. And then I just started showing it around. And, you know, no. And then you get lucky. Right. You know, and it's as simple as that. You know, there's just one person who just says yes. After the resilience of just a gazillion no's. And, you know, even today when you're raising money, there's a lot of no's. And then, you know, if you survive and you get lucky, someone says yes. And that's just the story of it.
Okay. Talk about real life challenge, you know, that you've had in your life, and you had the difficulties growing up, and you said you were growing up poor. But how did that give you the wherewithal or the knowledge to do what you're doing? Because you seem to have a very good understanding of the creative aspect of what, you know, to design, but then also too, you were very savvy enough to understand the business aspect of it. So as a designer today, when you look back at your life and what happened, were there any challenges or any pitfalls that you faced early on by not having certain knowledge about how to do the business or how to run the business?
Yeah, you know, you make a lot of mistakes. You make a lot of mistakes when you take on any endeavor, especially when you're doing something for the first time on your own and when you don't have, you know, a lot of help.
Right.
And so some of the pitfalls that I really face as an entrepreneur is that, you know, those difficulties of, you know, early on, you know, I didn't realize that when you made mistakes, you need to move on very quickly.
Right.
You know, so I would sit in mistakes, you know, for a period of time, trying to, you know, reconcile why it happened. And you know, there were great benefits to, you know, understanding, you know, what occurred. But, you know, now I realize that when you make mistakes, that's just a part of the journey. You know, you move on from those as, you know, as quick as possible. I would have to say, you know, probably one of the top things that I realize now at this point in time in my life is that being Black in America is probably the number one challenge when you're trying to do anything.
Right.
Particularly when you're in an industry where people at the top don't look a lot like you. People that are making the decisions don't look a lot like you. So you're one of many, you know, you're one of, you know, of a few.
Right.
And trying to, you know, navigate it on the one hand, but on the other hand, you know, tell a story in which you know is valid. And really owning that. And so that's probably one of the biggest challenges, I would have to say.
Okay. What are some tangible steps in order to build a fashion empire like yourself and what you've done?
Sadly, I have to say you have to have financial resources. That's just probably one of the number one things that you need in this business because it's so cash intensive. You know, you're not saving the world, you're not curing cancer, you're not doing anything that, you know, anyone needs. You know,
right.
It's not. It will never be the phenomenon of an iPhone. And so, You have to, you know.
This is true. You can wear the same top every day if you wanted to.
Yeah, and the other part of it is you really have to have a point of view and know yourself.
Right.
And today, you know, there's just really the opportunity to just really focus on who you are and what you stand for, and be very nichely focused and going after an audience. And I think that those two things really are helpful when starting a fashion brand. And then you just got to have very tough skin, because it is a very, very hard business.
Yeah.
And I think that probably...
And it's ever changing.
And it's ever changing. And right now we're in the most dynamic time in fashion. And I think it's a really great time in fashion, but you have to have a really tough skin to get through the tough times, especially in the startup years when you're building a brand and no one knows your name, and you know, you're telling a story and over again until you're able to, you know, acquire customers.
Okay. Well, we'll come back to that. Stay tuned for part 2. More with Miguel Antoinne coming up next.